Vinaka. So I'm Tony NAMULO. I guess my dad is from Fiji, and he is from the island of OVALAU, more specifically the village of LOVONI, so kei Igiladi. And my mum is she is first generation New Zealander. Her parents, her mother is from England and her father is from Switzerland. So I have a unique blend of European, in the truest sense of the word, and Fijian heritage. So definitely a blend or a mixture right there. So yeah. So I guess my journey started like many in Fiji. I was actually born at CWM Hospital in Suva. So and the late Dr. Anna Brown actually delivered me. So that was sad news that I read recently about her passing. So I was born in Fiji. Unfortunately, when I was only 2.5 when we left Fiji and we moved back to New Zealand. So I don't really remember too much of it as a child. The reason why I'm speaking to you in English today is one of those reasons, is that I grew up speaking English, my first language. I didn't really start learning the language until I was older, 15, 16 years old. And of course, at that time, it's a lot harder to learn a language. And so I understand Fijian much better than I speak it. And it's sometimes challenging for me when I'm pronouncing words that I feel a little bit embarrassed that I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, and people are like, what are you trying to say? So often I just default to English, and it can be a lazy thing because many people, you know, in Fiji and around the world speak English, and so it then doesn't push you to learn the language or a different language. So yeah, my apologies in advance.
Not a problem.
I pretty much grew up in New Zealand, and the neighborhood where we did live was predominantly Caucasian. So I didn't have an island community growing up from the age of, you know, from starting school all the way through to my early teens. All my friends looked different to me, which wasn't a problem. But one of the interesting things that I thought I would mention here is I never thought about color, race as being anything. The first time I really thought about my parents being of different ethnic backgrounds was when I was about seven years old. I was waiting at the school gate with one of my best friends, and he just, as a child, innocently said to me, like, because mostly my mum would come in and pick us up. And so most of the children had never seen my dad. And my dad happened to pick us up. And so we were really excited because that was something unique and different. And when he saw my dad, he's like, who's that? And I was like, that's my dad. And he's like, he's black. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized that my parents were actually different colors. For me, it was just mum and dad. So yeah, it was, it's interesting that I feel like as adults, children don't really think about race or ethnicity. And it's only a concept that I feel like other people introduce to you, especially if that's just something that's normal for you. I get that for other people where maybe both parents are the same ethnicity, that's normal for them. And so that's where they then see something that's different. So yeah, I grew up in Auckland and New Zealand. So that's a very Western culture. So my first real memory of, or understanding of the island or Fiji was when I was 11. I think I was about 11, 12 was my first trip to Fiji, and I was so excited. And yeah, from that age, I visited Fiji a number of times until we actually moved back as a family when I was 15 years old. And I did the last 2 years of high school at Gospel High School in Suva. So that was a very big change in terms of, obviously, my age group, my peers were all speaking either Hindi or Fijian in the playground. And so I felt under pressure, like I either have to, I get to either stay with a few, Palangi children, or I can, if I want to mix, I kind of have to listen to, what different people are speaking and kind of learn the language. And so I did a little bit of both. So high school was quite difficult in terms of, you've uprooted you don't have the friends that you had from primary school. One of the things that as a teenager, I had only been to Fiji on holiday. And so I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. All my friends in New Zealand were like, you're gonna live in like, everyone goes on holiday to Fiji, right? But the reality is, living in a country and going on holiday is very different. So with your holiday lens, you see all the perfect things like the white sandy beaches, the blue sky. You don't see the hidden things of, the challenges of maybe not having, transportation. If you don't live within the city, get on a bus, or you have to get a taxi or a carrier or something to be able to get around the island. So you don't see those things. And so, yeah, it was a great experience as a family moving back to Fiji. And I learned so much about myself as a teenager, in terms of what I wanted and what I didn't. I was able to contrast having seen what it's like living overseas, and also the benefits and also the challenges of living in a small island country like Fiji. There's always pros and cons of wherever you live. So that's one of the things that I learned very early on. And then pretty much decided it was around one of the challenges that I realized that Fiji has was around the high quality of candidates that are coming out of educational institutions, and then they have no jobs to go to. And so I was pretty much put in that same boat as everybody else, where, I was a young person, 18, 19 years of age, and I was then looking at joining the workforce, where there's this large amount of qualified people, but there's no jobs, or there's a lack of jobs that exist within the country. And so over that time, it was very challenging. My parents have always brought me up to be very principled, and I think there's certain things that I just will not do. And one of those things is, I believe that the work that you get, that you do, you should get paid a fair wage for that. And so what existed at the time when I was looking at jobs was this, what I would describe as a very unfair system that employers use. And the only way that I can call it is basically it's slave labor, where new graduates are either paid nothing for the privilege of gaining experience, or they're paid very little. And I'm talking about large companies within Fiji at the time. And I hope the practice has stopped, because it's not right. And so what I made the decision very early on was that if it wasn't a wage that I could actually live on, I wasn't going to accept the job. So on that basis, I turned down 3 different job offers. And I think my parents were like, surely, you should take it just so that you can get the experience. And I'm like, no, if everyone does that, employers will continue to think that that's an acceptable behavior. So from a very early age, I've always been very principled or headstrong in some of these ideas. And I know even my parents are like, we're good. We can support you through this time. But I'm just like, no, that's not good enough. And so I made a very different career path. So my background, my education background is software development, so that's what I studied. And so that's where I had been looking in terms of going into work. I'd been looking at IT, information technology, and so that's where I mainly got the job offers. But what I quickly worked out was that those job offers as a new graduate, and I'll be very transparent, at the time, I was being offered anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 Fijian dollars, not a month, a year. And at the time, we were living in Nauru, and they wouldn't even cover my bus fare every day to go from Nauru to Suva. And so I was just like, no, that's not acceptable. So I then started thinking about, okay, how can I get creative? How can I find a job that pays, better than that? And so I realized that when I was looking at jobs in the Fiji Times, that's how jobs were communicated in those days. You look at the classified in the Fiji Times, usually the Saturday papers, or sometimes even the Friday papers, was where you found your jobs. Yes. It wasn't online.
The classifieds,
yeah. I mean, it's different today.
Yes.
And I started seeing that the job offers for people that were like in admin roles in companies, secretarial positions, were earning more than someone who was technically trained. And so I was like, okay, I might as well just go for try my luck with a secretarial role. And I was fortunate that I went through the process of applying for a job at Wakaya, and it was actually for a receptionist job. And the managing director, I remember in the interview, kind of looked at my CV and then was like, yeah, all these candidates here have much more abilities than in terms of experience. But I like that you wanted to, try and I understand that you're wanting to do something. And so while I didn't get that job, he gave me the opportunity to go and there was a busy period on the island for 3 months. And so he said, look, I see that you're wanting to make some money. Would you be open to the fact of, working on the island for 3 months? So a very short period of time. And I was like, sure, why not? And so I went and worked on Wakaya, started off as doing stores, so helping to stock the rooms, doing inventory. So something that a lot of people would consider very manual labor. But for me, I was excited because I had my first paying job that, I could pay for myself without having to rely on mum and dad. So that was exciting in itself. And through that opportunity, I because obviously being a remote island, technical challenges with computer systems was something very real that they experienced. And there was an incident, I think about 4 weeks after I arrived, where they needed to be able to do checkout, and the computer system had gone down. And so, of course, the only way to be able to get someone to fix it was to be able to fly someone out. But instead of doing that, they called me, and I basically spoke to, because of course I've never used the system before, so I spoke to the person on the other end that was trying to help troubleshoot. And so I just shared my screen and I did all the actions on that side of things. And I think from that incident, they realized the benefit of having someone with those skills there. And so that was, there was an opportunity to then do the role of reservations manager there. And so I did the IT stuff part-time. And so, it was an opportunity that I got to kind of go into the hospitality industry, where a lot of my friends had literally gone down the path of hotel and catering, and then they were still struggling to get into kind of a job within hospitality. And so the thing that I learned from that experience was sometimes it's not the direct path that people think about. Sometimes it's those auxiliary skills. So for example, in my case, I had IT skills, which is something that hotels or this particular hotel needed. They could teach me that, excuse me, they had people that are all qualified in hospitality, right? That's the bit that they helped to teach me, is how to do the hospitality bit. And so that's the thing that I've learned through life, is that often employers and where you can really do something different is there's always something, a skill that you can bring to the table, but also recognizing that there's something that it doesn't matter what situation you're in or where you are at, there's always something that you can learn or take away from that. And that's how you grow as a person. So that's something that was really important. And it was from that experience of being able to do some IT projects, because at the time, 20 years ago, remember that Wakaya and Fiji Water were actually owned by the same people. And so I got the amazing opportunity to be able to also understand some of the ways that Fiji Water worked as well. And so as a young person, understanding some of the things like supply chain, these are the terms that businesses care about today, right? Supply chain, hospitality teaches you customer service, how to do that. And so these are skills that I learned very early on in Fiji that when I chose to relocate back to New Zealand, it actually stood me in really good stead for being able to get the kind of jobs that I wanted. So I would say that sometimes we think that you have to do some amazing job to be able to get experiences, to be able to make a lot of money, but actually the small things that we do every day give us the experience, gives us the skills to be able to do the things that we want to in the future. And so it was, I feel like my whole life has been unplanned in a way, but like a series of events that have gone from one thing to another. And, I believe in God. So for me, I feel that these are just all blessings when you're faithful, that these are some of the flow-on effects of what the benefits that you get. Not that we do these things to be able to get these benefits, but these are just I guess a benefit of being faithful. So that's how I like to think of it. And so when I decided that at the age of about 21, I wanted to continue my study. And so I wanted to do university in New Zealand. And the specific program that I wanted to do wasn't actually being offered in Fiji, either through USP or at the time through Queensland University at the OVALAU campus. So I made the decision, I saved up enough money to relocate myself back to New Zealand. And at this stage, I was totally self-sufficient for mum and dad. And so this was a nice feeling that I wasn't having to rely on them to pay for my airfare, all these things that up till that stage, I kind of always needed their help and support on. So yeah, I moved back and to New Zealand, and I was very fortunate. Family friends of ours, New Zealand's a very expensive place to live. And so family friends of ours were nice enough to provide me accommodation for what was going to be a couple of months while I got myself on my feet in terms of a job and then somewhere to live. But I ended up by being with them for a little bit over a year. And that was just super helpful in terms of helping me to save up enough money to be able to do that. But as I mentioned, my intention of moving back to New Zealand was for university. But life changes when you're in certain places. And so I'm very pragmatic about things. And so I had decided that if I'm going to do university and I want to support myself, the only way I can do this is I can only really afford to do this if I'm working. So I thought, okay, I need to get myself a job. That's the first thing. And then I can start putting myself through university, and that's how I can pay for it. So I thought, okay, what jobs can I do that are very easy? So what I wanted to be able to do was just do my job and not have to take any responsibilities home with me. And then I can then focus on my university, you know, outside, after working hours. And so I thought, okay, maybe the best type of job that I can do is a call center type job, right? Because you physically turn up to work, you do your work, and then you go home. You can't take your job home with you. So I started looking at those types of jobs, and so I applied for this role. I saw it in the newspaper because that's what you did then. And this job had like advertised that you needed, you know, simple computer skills, plus you also needed some troubleshooting. And so I thought, okay, great. You know, obviously I've been troubleshooting stuff, you know, with Wakaya and Fiji water computer systems for over a year, and I feel like I know what I'm doing, right? Because this is what I've been doing. So I thought, okay, I can apply for this job. So I went in for an interview, and very similar to my experience at Wakaya, I had an interview panel of 3 people. They were sitting there, and then they said, I don't think this job is right for you. And I was thinking to myself, why did you call me in just to tell me that, like, this is not right for you? And then one of the guys said, but we do have a different role in the company that I think that you would be perfect for because of your skills in hospitality. So again, you know, like going back to my hospitality skills because of my work at Wakaya. And I was like, at this stage, you know, all I cared about was, I just want a job. Like that's all I care about right now. I just need a job to be able to pay rent and so that I can start my university. And so they said, okay, we will hire you. It will start in a month's time. And I was like, okay, great. So I turned up to work on my first day, and we were in training. There was about 5-6 of us. And so it was for a company called Datacom. And now they're, you know, a very big company. They're $1 billion company across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. At that stage, they weren't as big, but they were getting there. So I started there with them, and it was on the first day when they told us who the client was that we were going to be working for, which was Microsoft. And so the interesting thing is, Microsoft, when I studied software development, that was always a company that I had wanted to work for. And of course, Microsoft is the biggest software development
in the world.
Right? Yeah. And so without my knowledge, I had, through different opportunities, got to start working with the Microsoft call center. So helping customers with their Microsoft product, if they were doing events or even basic technical support. And I quickly learned that if you put in a lot of effort, and if you do a good job, people see that, people appreciate it, and then they give you more opportunity. And so very quickly, I got opportunity after opportunity to manage different projects directly with Microsoft in New Zealand, and then also, helping to. So I became the team lead of the contact center in terms of the Microsoft account, and so I got to build a relationship directly with the client, which 2.5 years later led to me working directly for Microsoft. So I then got the opportunity to move to Microsoft New Zealand and do a role that was actually managing the content for both Microsoft New Zealand and Australia, so doing 2 countries. And so all the roles that I've done have always built on each other, which has been fantastic and amazing. And it's not been something that I planned or that I've necessarily looked for. But the thing that I would say is, wherever you are in life, there's always opportunity around. So it's those opportunities, they don't just happen. It's hard work, it's talking to people, so building your network. And to be honest, at that time, I was very young. I didn't know about how to build a network. It's just something that I did. But that's one of the things that since I've learned how to do that, that's something that's super important, that I always tell young people that it's really important to build your network, and more importantly, ask questions, not just for the sake of asking, but to seek understanding. If you are inquisitive and you want to learn about other things, that's how you increase your knowledge. And once you increase your knowledge and you're able to apply that in practice as well, you become a very valuable asset to other people because of your know-how. And so after, I guess, 2 years doing that, while I was with Microsoft New Zealand, I was in the fortunate position to do a lot of projects with in Singapore. So my boss at the time was based in Singapore, so I traveled to Singapore. I got to travel to Australia for conferences and to do projects in Seattle, which is where Microsoft is headquartered. And so doing all those different trips, I quickly realized that the thing that I really loved was to travel and to discover the world. And so that's what really ignited my passion for traveling. And so I realized that little old New Zealand, right down in the bottom of the world in the South Pacific, was not going to do it for me in terms of, like, it's a long way from everywhere. 13 hours to the US if you're flying to LA, 8 to 10 hours if you're going to Asia. And of course, the closest countries is like Fiji and the Pacific Islands, which is still 2.5, 3 hours away, right? So I knew from that experience that I needed to move somewhere. And because I was fortunate with my grandmother being British, I had a pathway there to be able to get a visa, an ancestry visa, to be able to go to the UK. And so I used that opportunity to relocate myself about 15 years ago. So that ages me a bit.
That the secret is out.
Young at heart.
Age is just a number.
People still think that I'm around 30, so I'm good with that. So yeah, I relocated to the UK, and one of the things that I would say is quite funny is parents are always parents, right? So there will always be people around you that will support you. There will also be people there that will, I wouldn't say hold you back, but will put little seeds of doubt, like, oh, is this really the right decision that I'm making? And so I had one of those encounters with my mum, bless her, because one of the things that you have to remember is that in the context of what was happening in the world at the time, was when I was ready to relocate to London, was terrorism had started increasing. And so that's when, so a couple of months before I was due to move, that's when they had the London bombings on the underground. And so obviously, as parents, they're concerned about the well-being of their children. So my mum was like, so you're not going, right? And I'm like, surely this is like the safest time to go, because they've literally just had their, that's the logic that I was using. And so I was like, no, Mum, I'll be fine. This is why we pray. So I went across, and I knew that my mum was probably a little bit unhappy with my decision, because I was now quite far away, opposite side of the world, which I understand. And so I know that those are the things that all parents have concerns about their children. And so I made the move, not knowing anybody. And in hindsight, I think I was a little bit naive in terms of my preparation for moving to the other side of the world without really any kind of support system. No real direct family that I knew of at the time, and without a job, because I actually, a lot of people think that I transferred internally with Microsoft. I actually officially left, and then I made the decision, because internal transfers, a lot of you may not know, but with large companies, internal transfers can take quite some time, and being young and impatient, I wasn't willing to I wasn't willing to wait. Now that might be different, but yeah, I was impatient. So I was like, yeah, I'll resign, I'll move myself across, and I'll get a job, right? I'll be able to do something. So again, I had a lot of blessings in terms of, within a week from landing in the UK, in London, I found accommodation, which was something that I could afford. I was able to, within 2 weeks, I had job offers from 2 different companies, which was a blessing as well. And it was primarily because of my experiences with Microsoft in New Zealand that got me those, the 2 job offers. So that's why I say that everything has been it's been a building block.
Like a stepping stone, building up the steps.
It really has been, yes. And so sometimes people want to just get there, but sometimes you have to take steps, and sometimes those steps aren't necessarily upwards, sometimes they're sideways, sometimes they're down to go up again. So that's totally okay as well. Everyone has their path. And so I was able to get a job back at Microsoft. I guess with so much change in my life, I made the decision to go back to Microsoft because it was an environment that I knew. And I don't regret that at all. I only recently left Microsoft and the UK last year, and that's how I came to Malta. So that's the long-winded version of how I got to Malta.